Hi, it's Rob from the Bob Sphere, and it's the end of October, which means a monthly wrap up. Okay, 10 books read, sort of. No, we'll get into the exception. Lots are good. See, I'm looking at them at the side. And yeah, well, let's get to it. No order of preference. Okay, so I read a lot of local books. Well, I read three, which is good because I didn't read any in the past few months. So I'm trying to make up for it. Anyway, so Kristen Spiteri, Perfettament Imperfetta, which means perfectly imperfect. This is an interesting one. It's about. It starts off as an kind of Adrian Mole pastiche, let's put it that way. So it's about a very horny teen who really likes his next door neighbor's sister. But then, as the book proceeds, it gets very, very sinister and darker and darker and darker until yeah, it gets a bit questionable. But it's a good read. It's a really good read. It's really well paced. I did laugh as well. The first bit's very funny, and then when the serious stuff comes, yeah, it's hard. Yeah. Um. Then we find out there's a little small twist where another person fancies this neighbor's girl as well, and yeah, that's all I'll go. It's a triangle, a love triangle, but a very strange one. That was good. Okay, speaking of love triangles, we've got another one actually. I wouldn't call it a love triangle really, but it is about love and relationships. This is Pa by Orla Owen. This is about, I would say, a nurse who lives in a sort of commune, well, a shared apartment, and the only way she can get out is by marrying someone. So she just marries the first person she meets, a person who she thinks she can manipulate, and she does. But it backfires completely. And again, it's a very dark story. A third person comes in as well in the narrative who sort of has a role. But I saw it as a book about breaking free from the shackles of society. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's well written. Okay, another local book. So Ramona de Pares, The Patient in Hospital Zero, is a collection of short stories. Um, mm, well, let's put it this way. They're very well constructed, and there's some lots of nasty twists, and I like nasty twists. That's it. But and this is a problem with when generally when Maltese people write in English. Now, this is the author is a journalist, but anyway, when Maltese people tend to write in English, they tend to use a lot of cliches and idioms because that's approved at school, and you see lots of that. Like the floor will swallow me up. I can't believe, I thought I would die there and then, things like that. And reading them constantly gets very tiring and it spoils the narrative. So if this is written better, if we get rid of those cliches and maybe, this is something to do with schools as such and the culture of Enid Blyton that is very heavy in Malta. Because those were the only. You see, it's a big cultural thing, and I don't want to spend all my time going into it. But in Malta during the 60s and 70s and 80s, I think Ramon's a bit older than me. The thing that flooded the market was Enid Blyton, and lots of people read that, and that was recommended. And on shelves, you'd only find Enid Blyton, and Enid Blyton has a very cliched way of speaking, but for Maltese, it was deemed idiomatic, and you find these cliches when Maltese tend to write in English. This is that. Then other stories then other authors then slowly like Roald Dahl started crawling in, etc., etc. But mostly it was Enid Blyton, and I can feel that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can feel that in this book, or at least the editor. So the concept and the twists are good. Let's put it that way. Maybe in the next offering, which I hope there will be, obviously, the, these problems will be eradicated. Okay, one of the big highlights of the month was a horror book. I read two this month, so I'm really glad about that. So this is one of them. Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. Where do I start? You'll never read. This is a haunted house story. You see, I'm jumping. This is a haunted house story, but one that breaks the mold, goes into different territories. So it's about let's see. I'm trying to see how I can word it without spoiling it that much. Okay, this is about a trans, yeah, trans woman and two cis, two cis girls. I guess I can say that, who spend a night in a haunted house, and something happens to them which affects their futures, especially the way they think. But this house keeps on calling them, and they have to spend one more night. This happens in the future than the calling. Well, I have to spend another night in this house to amend all the problems. I guess that's the tone I should even say. That's the best I can get it. This house has a bit of a history, but see, this is all superficial. What I mean is, this is a very, very symbolic story about transphobic attitudes, racist attitudes in Britain, and Britain has to shape up. This is a portrait. A few months ago, I read this one, Sterling Cared Gold, by Isabel Wadner, and they wrote about. Well, I should say there are similarities, except this is a more horror aspect. This one is, I mean, just as symbolic, but it goes into the bizarre. Let's put it that way. Speaking of bizarre, I have to mention one thing. One of the characters has a poster of the Smiths. Oh, maybe it's a little bit of a spoiler, so you can skip ahead. And, well, that's all I'll say. One of the characters jumps out of the poster and does horrific things. That's all. Okay, so highly recommended. As I am a cis male, this did open my eyes and help me think about attitudes. A must read. Okay, my other scary novel was Il Paraboli Talimginen. So this makes it the third local book I read this month by Keith Borch. Debut collection of short stories. There's a very Roald Dahl-esque vibe that goes through, especially in the first story. These are all, they're not spooky as such, except for one. It's more about alternative realities and, yeah, some grotesqueries in there. But it's not about ghosts or anything like that. It's more, Keith Borch focuses on dreams and the different types of worlds they present to the dreamer. But it's got good gross stuff. There's one bit with cockroaches. There's a chess game which is has a really nasty twist. Yeah, so they're well written. I kind of like the cover too. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, Bitter Orange. You could say this. I wouldn't say it's a Halloween book, but there's definitely a Daphne du Maurier vibe. This was a secondhand book I got from AB Books. It was, it was during the sale. It wasn't that much, so I said might as well buy it. And I've got Claire's other books in hardback as well, so might as well have this. So this is about someone who goes to a haunted mansion, and she meets a couple, and she goes into some really psychosexual drama. It's very eerie. It's creepy, and it's got a really good payback because the narrator is unreliable. This book has a lot of features I like in novels. So it's got unreliable narrators, it's got a mansion, it's got a creepy couple, it's very suspenseful, there's a good payback. Yeah, it's a really good read. Claire Fuller can do no wrong. Now I've read all her books and I like them all four. So again, this is recommended. Now, I have started a TBR jar. I think I showed this last time. This is where I have all the titles of the unread books and I pull them out. And as I expected, because when I did this 8 years ago, no, I stopped it in 3 years ago. When I did 3 years ago, the only books that the jar would choose are big, thick, chunky ones. And just doing it again. So, this has been on my TBR since 2010. So at least I got to read it. Okay, this is nonfiction. Sorry, I got a stitch. It's about the history of folk music, but modern folk music. So it starts off with, sound anthropologists collecting farmer songs, and then how that develops. And then we go into Bob Dylan, we go into Pentangle, we go into The Wicker Man. What the main message is that with folk, people want a return to the past, a sort of innocence, and folk embodies that. Even though there's also pagan rites and witchcraft involved. So it's a kind of, I wouldn't say primitive thinking. You know what I mean? A, a past where there wasn't organized religion. And that's included in the music. It's very informative, it's very well written. I could not put it down. It's excellent. You do need to have a little bit of a knowledge of folk music and some bands, though. It will help a lot. Okay. Now, the other, I would say this is my book of the month, Bewilderment. I did a video on this, so I'm not going to go into it. Check that out. To say I loved it, it's a very, very, very good book about climate change, a father-son story, well written, perfect, perfect, perfect. I hope this wins the Booker. And then the Dodd. This is a DNF. Usually I don't mention DNFs, but this is part of the Booker long list, and I failed this time. This means I try read all 13 books. So usually I succeed, but there's always one dud, and this is my dud. I just found it boring. Okay, so this video has gone on for 11 minutes. That's a bit long. I had quite a bit to say. Usually I'm quite minimal. It doesn't matter. Okay, how was your reading month? Did you read anything special? Comment, like, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. I like to thank all the publishers and authors who gave me review copies. Because I'm really grateful. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.